Um, Welcome everybody to this month's Legacy Loop. You're going to get a proper introduction in a minute, but my name's Oliver. I'm a solicitor and founder at Make a Will Online. We help charities up and down the country turn supporters' intentions to leave a gift into reality. We do that by providing a really smooth service for the supporters who want to leave a gift, as well as support and guidance for charities who want to learn more about the legal side, and also trying to keep everybody on top of best practice when it comes to providing a gifts in wills service and guiding supporters through the process. Hence today's Legacy Loop, and hence all of our future and past Legacy Loops, which can be available. I'll hand over to Marie now to tell you a little bit more before we launch the session with Richard. Marie.
Hi there, good morning everybody. Lovely to see you all and welcome to our February Legacy Loop. It's great to see so many people joining in. This month we're delighted to be joined by Richard Radcliffe, and I'll let Richard introduce himself in a moment. But just a little bit about Legacy Loop for those who are new to our session. I know we've got lots of our partners joining, but for those who aren't charity partners, this is our sort of monthly space at Make a Will Online for charities to explore, learn and connect on all things legacy, really. And today's session is going to focus on the changing world of legacy giving.
Yeah, I went via the Zoom.
Oliver's just sort of explained what we do at Make a Will Online, but basically we support charities with solicitor check will writing service, detailed reporting and supporter engagement tools, all designed to make legacy giving easier and more effective. And if anybody, wants to know a bit more, then do get in touch with me. Just a little bit of housekeeping. It would be great if you can add your name and your charity onto your name tag. Because that'll help us if you've got questions and in the breakout rooms and stuff. And if you've got any questions, if you can just put them in the chat, and there'll be time for answering those at the end of the session. But for now, let's get started, and I'll welcome Richard and let him introduce himself.
Hello, everyone. It's another horribly grim day, isn't it? Well, it is where I am in Cambridgeshire, but I can't wait for the spring. And it's great to be with you all this morning. And there will be plenty of time for questions at the end, just so that you know, because I'm hoping I will get a lot of questions from a lot of people, but we'll see what happens. And I just sit back and enjoy, and it is being recorded. Let's just go for it. People are still joining, which is good. But we're now just over, or just reaching 100, which is really brilliant. Right, so many of you might know roughly what I do, but I don't know how many of you know exactly what I do. And rather like the changing world of legacy giving, I actually have changed a bit as to what I do to meet the demands of the prospects, massive number of prospects for legacy giving. I've got over 35 years experience in legacy fundraising. A lot of you will know that. And in legacy giving, I say both, in about 30 different countries, and I'm off to Geneva next week. Sounds so glamorous, but it's not. It's just very hard work. And I enjoy my work enormously. Now, all I'm doing today is really very simple. I'm sharing the views of 38,000 people that I've met in focus groups. These are focus groups that are commissioned by individual charities. They're not public ones or omnibus surveys or anything like that. It is focus groups for specific charities when they request them. And I've done this for about 500 charities. And basically, I will spend between an hour and 2 hours with them, depending on the method of the focus group. So tomorrow we've got 2 Zoom calls. Those will be an hour maximum, because people don't want to be online for too long. Hope an hour is okay with you lot. Basically, I go through everything, not just legacies. I go through their whole philanthropic history, which charities they support, why they support them, what messages they like, which channels they use. And then I will go into whether they've got a will and whether they haven't, would like about making a will, and then into legacy giving, and I test them. I want to know what information they really, really need to produce action, because everything is always on the blasted to-do list, which is what I want. to make sure does not happen. I want it done, not to do, and which channels they use for legacies and everything else. And it is gobsmacking how different everything is now compared to 20 or even 35 years ago. And that's what I want to focus on today. So I think donors are changing far quicker than fundraisers. And that is what is so important, is the fact that we've got to bring fundraisers up to date with what donors and prospects generally need in terms of making their mind up about legacies, not forgetting that 1 in 3 people aged over 55 will put a gift in their will to a charity if they've got a very simple call to action and a few other things which we're going to discuss. So I have to say, it's just so different to what it was like when I first joined. And just for those of you who don't know, I was in fundraising before. I was at MS Society and the Order of St. John. And then I went to Charities Aid Foundation, took over 9 departments in Charities Aid Foundation, did a bit of research, first real research into legacies that CAF had ever done. And then I was asked to take over SME and Ford. So I took over SME and Ford, sold it in 2006 because my 2 fellow directors wanted to retire. I didn't. So I was outnumbered, which is a shame, but still good to be running my own consultancy now for 20 years. It's my 20th anniversary. Yay. And my goodness, you're going to see how things have changed. I draft strategies. Actually, I hate the word strategy. I much prefer a simple action plan. I know you should have both. But strategies are often full of jargon, and I'm with a client this afternoon where we've done a very simple strategy, and it's easy to do, and everybody knows what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. Over 500 so far. So focus groups usually lead to understanding what your strategy should be, because you can find your unique selling points in the research. And therefore it saves you money and helps you raise more. And then the strategies help to fulfill it. Now, I do train anybody to make the ask in a nice way. It's not actually making the ask, it's making people aware of the impact of legacies. So I train anybody. So in hospices, I might spend an entire day there doing 7 different meetings in one day, meeting virtually every member of staff and a number of volunteers. I train fundraising teams, major donor teams, communication teams. Sometimes communication departments are the biggest enemy of fundraisers because they don't understand the difference between a legacy and a donation and think it can be treated exactly the same when it cannot. It's an investment in the future rather than an instant action. I train anybody from volunteers. I've probably trained about 15,000 volunteers because often they interface with their local communities or in shops and everywhere else, and they are the most brilliant. I'm going to say legacy ambassadors, but it's not an official role because everybody says, oh, what's an official legacy ambassador? It's not. It's just them doing some very, very, very simple activities to make sure that you have an army behind you. Because usually legacy teams are very small, very focused, and rather isolated. Hope you didn't feel isolated this morning, folks. And the other thing, and this is one of the biggest changes in the last 3 years, since kind of almost the end of COVID, and that is we've always drafted things like websites, and this is where I bring in my wife, who was head of individual giving at the Royal British Legion. And she's an awesome copywriter, and we both really specialise in legacies. It's only the 2 of us. But yes, we do draft direct mail letters, we draft websites, we draft more than anything else now, things like letters to inquirers, pledgers, and executors and next of kin. And the reason for that will become crystal clear as to why you really must make more attention to the copy that is sent, particularly to executors and next of kin. And that was triggered by some research I did about 4 years ago, where we discovered that anything up to 40% of naughty solicitors were saying, don't leave a legacy to a charity. They're horrible. They chase you. The language is terrible. They're money and asset grabbing devils, which is one direct quote from a firm of solicitors. But it is increasingly common antagonism, which can be one advantage of using Make a Will online. But also we do anything from articles and leaflets. And well, I don't like drafting legacy leaflets and brochures because they're so superfluous on most, not all occasions and for most causes. Because everybody's saying quite simply, keep it simple, stupid. It's like good old whatever you call it. But it's just so important to keep things simple. Now then, so what has changed? Well, I've changed a lot. I started as a fundraiser 47 years ago, and I started doing legacy consultancy and research. It's almost 36 years ago now. And when I met supporters, I was a young man, still am in spirit. I met supporters and I thought these oldies were on another planet. I really didn't understand them at all. And I have to say that I was wrong. You see, I've joined that planet at the ripe old age of 71, and I have no intention of retiring, mainly because I have two teenage daughters and they're incredibly expensive. So I'll be working for as long as my body and brain allow me to. But they weren't on the wrong planet. I was, because I didn't understand older people. Now, I have to say, it's not just through the focus groups and the phone calls and the Zoom calls that I do with donors, because I do a lot of one-to-one phone calls with high net worth individuals at the moment as well, because they don't want to join a group necessarily. But basically, everything has changed. And what I do now is I follow about 5 universities who look at the decision-making process in older people on everything financial, because there's some fascinating research out there just to see what that process is. How does an older person make a decision to cash in their pension, which is incredibly common now, or to open up a new ISA, or to make their will, or to choose their inheritors. So that is what I spend a lot of my time in the evening on, because I love doing research in the evening and seeing what the latest news is on how people make a decision and which channels allow them the freedom to act and do something. So let's go back and see how things have changed in the last 20 years, because it is huge. And just for you, what we're going to do in about 20 minutes probably is we'll have a break for 7 minutes. Maria will set up a load of breakout rooms, and that'll be for 7 minutes. And then what we're going to do, we'll hold the feedback on those until the end of the formal session, okay, which Oliver and Marie will manage. So 20 years ago, 2006, when I started my own consultancy rather than working at Smee and Ford, or executive chairman. Oh, what a terrible title that was. So in those days, about 300 charities had active legacy programs. All right. It was very small. It was very niche. And there were thousands. There are now thousands. I mean, literally thousands upon thousands. And it is brilliant to see so many smaller charities, niche charities taking part in legacy campaigns and benefiting, because basically it was really simple. 85% of legacies were from single women or widows. And the reason for that predominantly was the two world wars. And basically they had no decision-making process at all. And my first focus groups, and I've still got some records of the outcomes of those very first focus groups 35 years ago, let alone once 20 years ago, was that there was no decision. They just did it because there wasn't any competition in a will whatsoever, because they didn't have a family. So it was an incredibly simple process. Now it isn't, but we've got to make it back to being a simple process. Now it isn't 85% legacies from single women, it is almost 50-50. According to Smee and Ford stats, it's 60-40, or has been in the past, but women live longer than men, which is one very good reason as to why there's a slight imbalance in genders. But if you look at the focus groups that I've done since the beginning of COVID, which is about 6,000 donors that I've met, if you look at those 6,000 donors, it's really interesting because just as many men as women are putting gifts in their wills, and a huge number with children. It's just the action they've got to take, because if you look at the silent generation and the baby boomers now, they are the most generous philanthropic generations ever. They're highly intelligent. They've usually been working, possibly both if it's a marriage or partnership. They are intelligent, they're clever, and gender is now irrelevant, which for some causes is really good. Because in the education sector, for instance, it was totally imbalanced by the female schools and female graduates from universities. They were the ones that leave legacies. It's not anymore. It's absolutely 50-50. But they're acting in ways that they never acted in 20 years ago, which is why I want so much change on things like your legacy web pages. So 1,200 charities were receiving legacies about 20 years ago. And yes, they were very typically things like the Cat's Home and Cancer Research UK. Actually, it was Imperial Cancer Research Fund and Cancer Research Campaign at the time. And probably their local church, because they worshipped, and I say church rather than temple or any other place of worship like a synagogue, because they were mainly Christian donors. Now, of course, it's very different. It's 12,000 charities benefiting from legacies and wills. And what is an absolute joy to witness is it's not just those three typical charities at all. What is going through the roof is all those less obvious causes for legacies, whether it's poverty, whether it's mental health in particular, that's growing like a rocket, whether it's education, whether it's the environment and campaigning. 20 years ago, no campaigning body really got any meaningful legacies at all, because they campaigned for no, let's change now, without ever looking into how to secure the long-term financial future of their charity, which is what they're now looking at. So what we have is virtually every type of charity you could possibly imagine on the planet thinking, oh, why do we do a legacy campaign? And quite right too, because they're going to miss the boat if they don't start a legacy campaign and sustain it over the next 5-10 years. And time lags is interesting because there's a whole load of misinformation. Many of you will know it here today. But, we die 6.8 years after our last will, which is absolute total load of rubbish, because actually it ranges from 20% of wills are under 2 years old and 20% of wills are over 20 years old. But if you look back 20 years ago, that time lag of 6.8 years is exactly the same as it was then, roughly. Hardly any difference at all. But it is the charities that are benefiting that is so brilliant. And the reason it's so brilliant is that donors are opening their minds as to how to support the charities they particularly love and continue their giving beyond their lifetime. Now, virtually all legacies were in a will, simple as that. But now they are not. And this is one of the biggest changes. Now, it's interesting. I'm doing 2 focus groups tomorrow for a charity which will remain nameless. And today, one person emailed back to my client saying, I'm so sorry, I'd love to come. I'm just not free to come. And the reason I haven't put a gift in my will is I've no idea how long I'm going to live for, and therefore there might be no money left. So I've decided not to put a gift in my will. Now, this is where I think the world of legacies is changed. This is the biggest change, and it's happened really quickly, almost since COVID in kind of 2019, 2020. Virtually all legacies were in a will. Now, if you take the last 1,500 donors, up to 70% of legacies aren't in the will. They're in a letter of wishes. Now, that's not seen by SME and Ford because they don't get it with the grant of probate. Now, the interesting thing is, it's really important when making a will that you should be told about a letter of wishes. because that is where things like your guardians to your kids, if you've got kids aged under 18, they shouldn't be in a will at all. It should be in a letter of wishes, which is much more accessible than your will. Instantly. It should be whether you want flowers or donations at your funeral. It should have your charitable legacies in there as well, in case you run out of money. Now, many of you will know, having been on other training, that I'm 71 and I have 2 teenage kids and 2 in their 40s. And of course, this begs the question, when will I be able to retire? And how much will I need? And when am I going to die? Etc., etc. And I haven't a clue, which is why my solicitor said, just don't put any legacies in your will. Put it in a letter of wishes, addressed to your executors, which is my wife and solicitor. And then, if there is enough money, they'll obviously release the legacies. But if there isn't, family comes first. Now, there's these huge arguments going around the sector, which I think are incredibly misleading and really annoy me. The number of people who are, let's say, not as well trained as people like Oliver, who might say, oh, don't do a letter of wishes because it's not legally binding. So we've taken the views of about 300 solicitors on the benefits or the risks of a letter of wishes versus a codicil, which is now redundant and terribly dangerous because the average codicil legacy seems to be coming in at about £200–300, or maybe 500. But a letter of wishes is morally binding. I know it's not legally binding, but that's its huge advantage, because having interviewed so many solicitors, all of them, except for one who was a kind of backstreet practitioner in another world, basically said it gives independent evidence for the judge that that is what you wanted to do. So it is actually supporting the idea of a legacy to a charity, and adds to any evidence that a court might need if a will was contested. So that is the research that I've done, and I find this gobsmacking because, of course, Smee and Ford say, quite rightly, that the wills that they look at have legacies in of about 4.5 billion. How many are in a letter of wishes that aren't known about? Now, there was a letter of wishes legacy that was left, but it was classified as an in mem gift, and it was £50,000, and that was a small percentage. So we don't really know what the legacy income is of the sector. My belief is it's well over 5 billion and will double to 10 billion plus in the next 20 years, the fastest growing source of income anywhere on the planet, far quicker than donations, which are still really flat. So this is a big change, because solicitors are now knowing that financial planning is uncertain in terms of longevity, use of assets, dementia care in particular, and various other things, and fragile families. So this has resulted in massive changes, because what people are now doing is saying, I wonder what the impact of my legacy will be. And I think I'm just going to look into your financial needs. Now, the number of annual reports I look at, which is vast, because I look at the annual reports of every single client I work with, plus some I might be working with, and then I know what their position is the annual reports at the moment are very variable. Some are absolutely superb and give the impact, but they express where you get your funding from? Because often what is left out is a really simple explanation. So I'm working with a charity at the moment, and it's the one I'm doing focus groups for tomorrow. And I looked at their accounts, and I cannot understand how much income is from services provided and how much income is from grants, because it's all nobbled together under charitable activities. So I have no idea what their financial needs are. I'm a typical prospect, absolutely typical prospect. Maybe hopefully more legacy aware than most of them. I have no idea what my impact will be of my gift. I have no idea what they need it for, because I have no idea where they get their money from. So this is one of the first things that many donors do. They'll go onto your website and look at your annual report and accounts, and do they come away with a clear picture as to how well you're doing, how many pence in the pound goes to the cause. How much do you spend on fundraising and administration? But much more commonly now, how much is everyone paid? Because there is enormous cynicism about salaries, which I think is a disaster, because if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys, and you need good leaders, really good leaders. But they have to be very careful as to how it's expressed, because once you see that 10 members of staff are being paid over 60 grand, that is when they begin thinking, well, I know where my legacy is going, which is a bit of dangerous misinformation, because those leaders might be utterly superb and improving performance. But these are one of the main reasons why people go to your website, but they don't go to the blasted legacy pages, because they're looking for your financial needs. And do I go to a website to find out information? Well, I do, actually, because I'm very active on the internet. But do many oldies do so? But there is far more flexibility and less certainty of a legacy for charities in a way, because what happens with the letter of wishes is it's very easy to change, which, if you're communicating brilliantly with your legacy prospects, is wonderful, because they might well upgrade your legacy. But if you begin upsetting them, right, it looks as if there's any dodgy performance, what does it produce? It produces the hokey cokey legacy syndrome. Legacies in, legacies out, shake them all about. So it is incredibly donor-centric, these letter of wishes. And the biggest problem I have with boards is trying to produce a strategy that is measured from the donor's point of view rather than internal accountability. And I'm with one very large global charity this afternoon, trying to work out how we plan what to say to the board to convince them to trust a donor to do it as much as they trust you to spend their legacy really well. This is something that didn't happen 20 years ago. Never. Not a hope in a million years. So there is a lot more too. 70% of those I've met who are high net worth individuals, and I classify high net worth individuals as about worth in excess of 5 million. Wouldn't it be nice to be worth in excess of 5 million, eh? Believe that the transfer of wealth for them will be far less than expected. And that is driven by the breakup of the family structures in this country. We have one of the fastest growing populations of a blended family. 6.5 million out of 19 million are blended families. It is massive. It's 1 in 3. In places like Australia, even Germany, it's 1 in 20. And I think what is happening out there is we have temporary partnerships, we have divorces of grandchildren and children, there are splits, there are redundancies and unexpected financial disasters, which everybody's getting at the moment in the middle of this horrible economic crisis and global. That's a horrible world. I hate to think what my kids are going to grow up in, what kind of world the younger ones will grow up in. But we're also living longer, which is why we need all these flexible approaches like a letter of wishes, because transfer of wealth is fantastic, but it certainly isn't going to happen to the extent that the Americans believe. For instance, they just think everything is going to go to charity and it's a massive transfer of wealth, which when you speak to American donors isn't true either. Contested wills. Now, this is obviously one of the fastest growing problems. That's why I do like Make a Will Online. I'm not going to say I recommend them because I'm not allowed to recommend anybody, but I do trust them because contested wills are going through the roof. Now, according to the government itself, the Ministry of Justice, the contested wills last year went up by 56%. Research with numerous other firms of solicitors, it's gone up 260% in the last 5 years. Are you ready to deal with angry next of kin? Because some of the letters that I've seen that charities are sending out to next of kin are quite appalling and enough to result in a contested will. Now, there are, as I said earlier, loads of solicitors who are very anti-charity. So you must be careful. Choose a safe platform, for goodness sake, where there are supportive solicitors or a solicitor-led service. It's really, really important. Now, I have to say that it is important to make sure that they have things like your will being safe and things like that, okay? But please note, legacies are not driven by these people who are going to inherit loads of wealth. They're driven by loyalty, 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 loyalty. It is the length of time they've been engaged as donors, as volunteers, as lottery players, as shoppers. The last two are the most brilliant, brilliant legacy prospects, okay? But remember, this is the case that many of you might have read about if you're on LinkedIn, with me on LinkedIn, was the guy who was giving £60 twice a year, 60 euros actually, because it was in Europe, never had any engagement, but he gave for 6 years non-stop, didn't want to be invited to an event, didn't want to, just wanted information on legacies. What he must have done, he read a Gifts and Wills newsletter and was invited to an event and fed back on what the event had. And he ended up leaving a legacy of £100 million when he had no identifiable wealth. Yes, that was £100 million. And 2 weeks later, they got one of 80 million. And yet their communications were fabulous. No chasing, no pressure to make a will, no pressure to leave a legacy, just really nice, positive, lifting stories. So having given you the kind of world at the moment, some questions for you. Do fundraisers aged up to 40-ish, because I'm not 40 anymore, have the same views on life as someone my age? No. Because I'm planning everything. I'm looking forward to planning everything, as somebody my age does. I have to make sure that everything is as secure as it can, and I fulfill maybe a couple of things off my bucket list. Do you use the same media channels as me? No, you probably don't. I use LinkedIn, but that's for business purposes. I use Facebook, but that's for personal purposes. And if any person wants to be a friend on Facebook, I remove them because it's purely personal. I wonder if I'm normal at my age. I don't use Snapchat or TikTok, needless to say, although my daughter sends me recipes from TikTok because cooking is my other favourite activity. Would you answer the same call to action as me? No, the answer is not, because you probably go online and make some call to action. Am I going to make a call to action online? No, I will not. Absolutely not. Because I'm really not convinced it's worth it. And if you take the last 5,000 or 6,000 people I've met since COVID, it's really interesting that fewer than 100 people have even visited your legacy web pages. Would you put a charitable legacy in now and keep it there for 30 plus years? I think that's an absolute joke. I really do. I'm after oldies, as you will discover. Is our economy looking good for my and your future? Well, in a way, I'm really glad I'm 71, because that way the world is turning into a horrible place, and God knows what the future is, which is why Letter of Wishes is kicking in. Is the world facing a wonderful, certain, and peaceful future? Oh, God. Oh, dear. I better say no more. I might get political. Are all families in the same structures as they were 20 or even 10 years ago? No, they're not. As I said, 1 in 3 families is now blended. Life is uncertain, the economy is uncertain, families are uncertain, legacies are uncertain, but everybody wants to do it. Are grandchildren and children needing more support? Yes, which is why they're stopping giving donations, often because they haven't got any cash in the bank. But what they are doing is leaving a legacy because it doesn't cost anything now. And this is getting more pronounced virtually every week that I'm meeting donors. It is just, it was why I'm so excited about my job. It's just so awesomely and fascinating at the moment. Are we outliving our assets due to longevity? Yes, up to a certain extent, but a lot of uncertainties in terms of taxation of pension pots. I don't think we'll know really what the future of inheritance tax will be either, because we don't know anything in terms of, or most things about the tax plans of the current government. Are taxes changing as I head towards retirement? Yes, but I'm not sure in which way. But I intend to spend all my pension pot to make sure there is no tax on it. So legacy giving must be tailored to meet lifestyles, and it has to be family friendly and affordable. So don't be a shepherd. Don't be a sheep, be a shepherd. I do not want you to copy others. What is frightening me beyond belief is that you get a case study at a conference or a convention, or somebody wins an award for their legacy campaign, and you think, oh, let's do that because that's obviously worked really well because it's won an award. Wrong. Because every charity is entirely different. You cannot run a campaign for a university as you would for a hospice, or you would for a poverty charity, or a mental health charity, an environmental charity, an art gallery, a museum, or anything like that, because they're all entirely different. The profile of the prospects are entirely different. And copying the worst copy you can ever do is Cancer Research UK, because their brand is so huge that people just die of cancer and the relatives say, oh, I better leave a legacy to Cancer Research UK. It's not their website that works, it's the cause that works for them. So the worst thing you can do is copy, and we need new thinking, which is personally why I use no templates for virtually anything at all. Because copying is not good. So we're going to be coming up to the break in a minute. When do you want to get legacies? In 30 or 50 years, or whilst you're in your current legacy position? Nobody can thank you for your efforts when you've left or died in 50 years' time. Do you really want to be thanked because actually you really focused on people in their 70s, 80s, and 90s? And then they left a legacy which you can celebrate truly because it really was thanks to you. If you concentrate on young ones, the money's unlikely to come in for 30, 40 years, if ever. And that does not help. So we're going to have a break for 7 minutes. And it's now 11:37, so it's just about perfect. We've just got one other subject at the end. What information do older prospects want, and what is the call to action? All right, so we're going to have 7 minutes now. We'll be back at 45, otherwise we'll be late, and I hate anybody being late. I mean, the first is they need your legacy vision, which is unique to you. And we always have a template for it. Some of you will know this. We say it has to be fundable, urgent, credible, inspirational, and tangible. This is the one message that is unique to you. And I have to say that when I go onto websites, let's say 300 or 400 of them, I can hardly see one that really is brilliantly passionate, uplifting, and positive, and also maybe with a little tinge of nostalgia at the same time. It is the one thing that I think we're not paying enough attention to, apart from something else, which I'll get onto in a minute. This is really annoying because once the vision is completed and you've said it and you think, wow, the call to action is to make or update a will, which isn't unique to you, but they need a really trustworthy service to make sure that their action is completed. So this is where obviously Make a Will Online come in. But it is the vision that is lacking on so many of your websites, because people are just focusing on making a will when 70% of people over 60 have a will and 80% of people over 80 have a will, but it might need updating, which they can still do through a new will and maybe an updated will through Make a Will Online or other provider. And it is really important because a lot of people make their will when they're 35, once they've had kids, and they don't do it again until they retire. That's the people you're trying to get hold of to go online and make a will. So which audiences are your best prospects and which channels do they use? Which is the easiest way for an 80-year-old to make a will when they're less mobile, cash poor, and concerned about the cost of a solicitor, but asset rich? And the answer is a good, trustworthy supplier. Because if I'm less mobile, I don't want to go to a solicitor. So if I can do it online, if I'm savvy online, and I've got two brothers, 189, 187, and they're both very savvy online. But they won't necessarily go to your legacy web pages. But if you make making a will really easy, they will do it and then put you in. But that is not where communications finish, because we are possibly facing a major problem in terms of the way we communicate with next of kin. So this is my last point. So when somebody dies, do you know if they're opening a bottle of champagne or weeping buckets of tears? We haven't a clue. Don't assume you know by offering condolences, which is the most awful word. You only use it when somebody dies, and it basically means with pity or with sympathy, and that's not what you want to hear when a death happens. Let me give you one experience. Husband with dementia for 6 years. This was a donor I was speaking to one-to-one on the phone. He put on 10 pairs of underpants each morning. He had breakfast numerous times every morning. And he was becoming very violent to his wife, who they'd been married for 40 years. Was she relieved at his death? Yes, she, excuse my English, bloody was. Because it wasn't him who died. He died when he'd got really severe dementia, in effect. She doesn't want condolences. And in fact, there are so many examples of this, it's quite scary. Quote from the widow, to be honest, it was a bloody relief and a release for both of us. Now, by offering a condolence, that's not a way of offering empathy or even sympathy, but sympathy, I think, is rather patronising. 6,300 people die every month from dementia in the UK. 1 in 3 are expecting to get it. If you take, for instance, it's a celebration of a great life. I just was at a funeral last weekend, and it was called A Celebration of the Life of Julia. It was absolutely amazing. And a most wonderful celebration it was too. Now, when my mum died of a stroke, we didn't shed a tear because she'd actually been in a terrible state before her death. 3,100 people die each month from a stroke in the UK. So we're up to well over 6,500 now every month, dying from things where maybe I wouldn't want a condolence because we wanted to celebrate lives. My father died of stomach cancer, and it was a peaceful death. He was really wanting a peaceful death. My mum was so pleased he was out of the agony. And yet, if you look, it's 14,000 people die each month. So we're up to 20,000 deaths every month, let alone other things. So that your job does not end with a legacy. And I do hope that all of you are directly communicating with executors and next of kin. And it's not the finance department who are seen as the money grabbing asset people. We've got to enhance and protect your brand and reputation to make sure that there aren't rumours going around about how awful you are, and there are rumours going around not only with next to kin but with solicitors and other executors who think they've been treated really badly quite soon after the death of their relative. So your job goes beyond that, and I have to say there are very few examples I know of really good letters with these target audiences. So that's it. I'm going to stop sharing now. And we've got, I'm hoping, about 10 minutes, rattle through the last bit a bit more, for any questions and a roundup, and passing over to Oliver and or Marie.
Super. Look, Richard, what a fantastic 50 minutes or so of content for us. Really great to have the retrospective from your unique perspective within the industry. And it'll, I hope, give people inspiration to continue with positive communications around gifting the world, but also think about what happens at the end of the process and the kind of ongoing communication with families and loved ones. Loads to think about intergenerational messaging, and loads to think about making sure that it resonates with the right people at the right time. So huge thanks from me and hopefully from everybody. We're going to move on to that's the end of the formal session. If anybody would like to stick around, and we hope you do, we can just start drawing out some of the stories from the work that we did in the focus groups in the breakout rooms. What information do people want? It'd be great to workshop and share in the chat, or it just raise your hand, say anything that came up in your group, and also what calls to actions work with your supporters. And remember Richard's very, very wise words. Don't just copy other people, but by all means do draw inspiration from good communications in others. So handing back over to Richard or to the group, or to anybody who cares to share what went on in your rooms.
Elizabeth has made a point from St Wilfrid's Hospice that she doesn't share my optimism in numbers and values. I do think there's a threat to future values because of longevity and blended families. I'd agree with that. But I think the numbers will increase so fast that it'll kind of rebalance it. So I'm still incredibly optimistic. Any other chat questions?
There are. Sarah Seddon from Combat Stress has asked, do you think it's noticeable seeing more contentious wills and estates, especially with no win, no fee solicitors, my favourite compatriots, not, but yeah, is it noticeable, and is it the fault of the system or the solicitors who are involved?
I don't think we know, Oliver, do we? Because certainly in my experience, I was attending a webinar with 14,000 solicitors some weeks ago. I think it's a massive number anyway. And there is no such thing as a perfect will maker because there are some dreadful solicitors as well. But I do think you have to look at with really in-depth due diligence that the will maker is as competent, the one that you're linked up with is as competent as possible, and have as many safeguards to your will, and it is a legal document and legally approved, because there are some suppliers that don't have legally approved and they say it's not legal and they have no liability at all. So I think it's just that trustworthiness of the supplier, and the call to action is to make a will.
Yeah, I just want to add, when it comes to contested wills, if you ever come across a situation in which you think that you may be in for a slightly troublesome time with a gift in a will, don't panic. Don't panic. You can get in touch with us. We do not do any contentious probate work, but we're really happy to point you in the direction of other really savvy contentious probate practitioners, one of whom has an online claim checker, which I'll be happy to share a link with if it ever does happen to you, which should put your mind at rest and may give you inspiration for a proper next step to protect your charity and protect the wishes of the supporter who left that gift. So if that ever happens, do get in touch and we can signpost that for you.
Okay. Two questions I'll answer that are in the chat at the moment. Can you give examples of really good legacy communications? No, I want you to think new and not to copy anybody else, because what's good for a hospice is not good for a university, which won't be good for a mental health charity or an environmental one. I do think that one of the biggest changes is a Gifts in Wills newsletter, which replaces the brochure and is basically brilliant, uplifting storytelling. Now, the interesting thing on that, very briefly, because I know we've only got 4 minutes left, there was a client who did a lovely newsletter, and it had one uplifting story and the rest was the kind of current situation, which was a bit dire. The good news story got about 10 times the response of anything bad news, because I think we're all so bloody miserable at the moment with the weather and the economy and violence and war, that good stories are better than bad stories. Can I give you an alternative opening line to sympathy or condolences? No, I won't, because I think you should think for yourself. Because I don't think we need one standard line. I'm terribly sorry. Sorry, Philip. I think what we have to do is we really can't imagine what they're going through, because I have no idea what anybody goes through when anybody dies, because I have no idea what their situation is. You just can't presume you know.
Okay, thank you, Richard. There's probably time for one or two more questions. Really interesting one from Julian here, with how do smaller charities overcome concerns about changes to the charity? What might happen to the charity in the 20 years between someone making their last will and passing? How do you overcome those larger charities? What's the superpower of the smaller charity?
I think this is superpower is usually the niche market it's in. I don't know where Julian's from Pippletree. Yeah, I mean it's a very inspirational charity, I have to say, and it's absolutely brilliant. But I would just the trouble is every legacy campaign should be led by trust and confidence that they have in you to continue, and you to have to give them that you will spend their money really, really well. So if you have a charity that's founded by a particular founder, you've got to make sure there's almost an inherited leader beyond that founding leader, to make sure that that cause continues. And that is very common when you've got a predominant leader who's founded a charity. What happens after that person dies? Oh dear, it'll fold. No, you've got to give reassurance that there are people following in the footsteps of the founder to ensure the future of Pippletree or any other one.
Yeah, really good thinking about succession within the charity as well as the legacies, and succession and
Yep,
legacies almost often go together. One last one from Katie from the Range Humour charity. What sort of call to action works better with generations who are doing their financial research before making their decision? So again, going back to that boomer and silent generation communications, what's flavour rather than of call to action works best?
It's really difficult to know. I have to say that the world of wealth advisors and financial services advisors are far more important for baby boomers than solicitors in a way, because what happens with most people, no, don't worry, Oliver, don't worry. What will happen is you will go to your wealth advisor or financial services advisor, depending on what wealth you've got, and you will make your mind up as to how to plan your inheritances with that person, and then you will go online and make your will, because a lot of the decisions are made by the time you go onto a will making service. So it is that process. I think wealth advisors and financial services advisors are really important there. And as long as they know about things like the 1% legacy, and I know it's very controversial, but it is working a dream. It was tested with 750,000 people in Australia and had a 58% increase in engagement in terms of the 1% legacy. But some of you are putting just 1%. You must always say you could leave even 1% so that your family inherit 99%, but you can leave more if you want to. Because that also overcomes some of the worries about how much you're really going to be worth when you die as well. So that call to action of 1% is really brilliant to gain engagement, but it's then up to their choice. And we've had people leaving 5, 10, 15, 20, 40, 48% was one. Just because they hadn't thought of leaving a percentage legacy, they'd left a few hundred quid in their will and they changed it to 48%, raising about 1 million instead of a few hundred.
What a fantastic story. No, thank you, Richard. We're at time now. I want to say just a huge thank you for sharing your really wonderful insight and from your long career and the trends that are going on. There was lots of other questions in there about blended families, which we weren't able to address, but I'll see if we can put out a blog in the next few days. I want to hand over to Marie just to close the session, tell you about the next one, tell you about how you can learn more about Make a Will Online and how we do things, and whether you feel that would fit with your charity if you're not already working with us. But first of all, let's just put our hands together, say a huge thank you to Richard for giving up your time to speak with us today.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Richard. That was a wonderful session. Lots of really nice comments in the chat. Very inspiring. The next Legacy Loop is going to be on the 24th of March. I'm working on it at the moment, so save that date. And as I said at the beginning, if you're not one of our charity partners and you want to find out more information about how we work at Make a Will Online, then just email through to me. I'll be sending out the follow-up and I'll put my meeting booking link on there. If you want to find out more, just get in touch and then we can have a talk through. Okay, wonderful. So thank you all.
Many thanks, everybody.
Thanks again,
See you
Richard.
all. Session. All the best. Cheers.
Bye.